Hey guys, my name's Alex Hubbard. Welcome to the ACH Automotive channel. Today we're working on our 2017 Ram 1500. We're going to be doing the rear brakes on it. I've got a set of brand new Powerstop rotors and pads. We're going to basically show how to do the driver's side. So the other side will be the same, but to keep the video short, we're going to do, I'm going to show one side. So I'll show you how to do it. It's pretty straightforward. So let's get started. Some of the tools we're going to need today. We'll need some sockets. I've got to determine which size we need, but we need to get the wheel off, we need a 7/8 and your security bit. Need some extensions, 1/2-inch drive, and a breaker bar, some brake spoons, some thin wrenches probably to get the caliper off the caliper slide bracket, and if you have an impact gun like this Milwaukee Fuel 1/2-inch drive gun, that will help you as well. There will be some other sockets I'll bring through in the video as we get into it. So we've got the truck jacked up. I got the jack underneath. I'm going to put a jack stand under it. But since we are working on the rear brakes, and I've let the emergency brake off because this is it's disc brake, but the emergency brake is inside the rotor. I've chalked both the front and the rear wheels just so, and the truck is in park. Just as a precaution so it doesn't roll. We're gonna throw a jack stand under there and then pull the tire off. Now we've got our jack and jack stand under the truck. We're gonna pull our tire off here. Got the lugs off the tire. The next thing we're gonna do is pop this tire off here, and there we go. And so now we can work on the brakes. One thing that I do with the tire when I'm working on is I slide it underneath the truck or whatever the vehicle it is. That way, should my jack or jack stand fail, that gives me a little bit of room for safety. What we've got to do now is we've got to take this caliper off the slide bracket. And these brakes aren't as bad as I thought they were. They're pretty low, but they're not that bad. We're going to take the caliper off the slide bracket, compress the caliper, take the pads and the slide bracket, off the rotor and knuckle assembly. Then we can back the emergency brake pads off here with a brake spoon. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. There's a grommet back here that pops out that will, just like on the drum brakes, it's essentially drum brakes. We'll back that off so we can slide the rotor off. In addition to the tools that I laid out, it does not look like you'll need the thin wrenches on the backside. You will need them on the front. You'll need probably a 3/8 breaker bar and a 10mm 6-point socket. And we'll break that bolt loose, and we'll find the bottom bolt here. And we'll break that one loose. There we go. There we go there. Okay. Now we can work on getting, you might need a pry bar to pry this caliper off. And this guy is actually, okay, yeah, so it tips off. The caliper looks like it tips off like this. And then it actually looks like the pads are actually in. This is the first time I've done this, so we'll take this apart. In order to get this off, you'll have to compress the caliper, and you'll do that by sliding a bar like this, a breaker bar, in the hole here and prying against it to release the pressure, and then the caliper will pop off like this. Now you will still have to take a either a caliper compression tool or a C-clamp and a block of wood and push the piston in the rest of the way, because it's not in all the way, and once you put the new pads on it, it won't fit back on. So we're going to reuse this caliper. There's nothing wrong with it. So we'll take that, we'll tie this up out of the way. I got a bungee cord. We'll make sure, because you don't want to put any stress on that ABS wire or the brake hose itself. So we'll get that out of the way here and get these pads and slide bracket off. Take our pry bar here and loosely pry our pads off like so. You can see, wasn't as low as it looked through the wheel well, but it's still This one was squawking quite a bit, so do the same thing to the back side. And I'm not reusing the rotor or the pad, so there we go. Yeah, back side is a little worse than the front side. To get the caliper slide bracket off the knuckle, you need a 21 millimeter 6-point socket. Unfortunately, I don't have a 1/2 inch drive one, so we'll have to use, this is I think a 3/8 drive coupled to a 1/2 inch drive socket, so we'll break those loose. We got these guys loose here. Take them off. You see, that blue Loctite makes it real fun to get this bolt out. Somebody went really overkill with the Loctite. Get the top one out. If you have the right pneumatics or battery operated tools, this will go a lot easier. I don't have ones that'll get in there easily. We got our slide bracket off. What we need to take off now is this little clip here. If you remember on my, I think it was a Jeep video, the Jeep had an alignment bolt that went through that we used a hex or Allen bit to get off. What that bolt does is during assembly, while the truck or the vehicle is on the assembly line, it holds the rotor on until the guy putting the caliper and the pads on can get to it. That way the rotor doesn't fall off. Well, in this case, on this truck, they use a clip on the lug instead of a bolt. So we've gotten our plug out here. Let's figure out which way this guy moves. Before we get too far along in this build here, or this repair, we should probably open up our boxes from Summit Racing and Powerstop. Now let's make sure we got all the parts we need here. I have another box over the floor there, because I should have front brakes and rear brakes. We're only doing... somehow I got lucky. This is the rear rotor and pad kit, which is part number PWR-K2172, and somehow I got lucky and picked that box as the first box I chose. So I'll have another video of the rear, of the front brakes. We're doing the rear ones first. Let's open this guy up here. And there we go. So I'm going to assume the rotors AR 875-2XL and 875-2XR are left and right. So we'll open those up. These are our Powerstop pads here. Let's see what these guys look like. These should have all the hardware and stuff that we're going to need. Yep. Brand new clips, brand new pads. Awesome. What this guy looks like. So that is the passenger side rear. We are going to put that aside for a minute, and we're gonna take the driver's side rear. I just want to see what the back side looks like. Okay, so for the emergency brake to work, this works exactly like a set of drum brakes. There's a set of pads that sit in here, and they act when you press the pedal. They actuate against this to lock the truck in place. So this is a pretty beefy rotor. These are slotted and drilled, and the reason that these have a direction is I believe because of the slots and the holes in it. So that's what the new rotor looks like. When we get ready to put this on, we'll do the same thing we do in all the brake videos on this channel. We'll clean it with some brake clean or paint thinner or something just to get the oil and stuff off of it. A trick with this truck, if you don't have you can't just turn the key to get it into neutral. So what you need to do is you come over here with your trim stick. This is on the left side of the steering wheel, and you pop this door off, and you pull. There's a tab in here that you push down, I think it was. Now I gotta figure out how to re-engage it. You push down and then you pull this tether backwards, and this effectively puts the truck in neutral, which will then allow us to come over here, now that we've got our brake free, and move the drum around so we can get a good, because the dust shield is in the way here, so you can't get a good swing on the rotor. We've got our rotor just about loose here, and you might have to work it back and forth. There we go. Just because, oh yeah, that's got a lip on it. Okay, so this is the gear in here that we were pushing down through the back hole to pull these pads in, and you can see these are the pads that the emergency brake operates. And what happens, let's come over here, hopefully you can see, is just like on a regular drum brake, is it gets a groove worn in here, so you have to retract the pads enough so this rotor, or this drum, will come over the pads. I also took a little Croil, squirted it down there. You can see it's a little wet. Now we're pretty much ready to put the new rotor on, put it all back together, and we'll have to, when we're done with the other side, we'll have to readjust the parking brake or the emergency brake and make sure that it's functional. One thing that I've shown here a couple times, well, first of all, we're going to clean this off, move your tools out of the way, don't get your tools all filthy. And because this is the first time this truck has ever had a brake change, it's brand, the truck's only got 66,000 miles on it. We're going to put a little bit of never sees around the hub here, and this will keep the hub from corroding to the rotor. So the next time you go to change these, just put a little bit around it. Doesn't have to be much, just enough, keeps stuff from corroding. So the next time you go to change your brakes on this truck, you won't have to hopefully use the hammer to get that off. Now that we're ready to put the rotor back on, we're going to take it out of the packaging here, a little bit of brake clean, gets all the machining oils off. We'll do both sides. Now we can put this nice new Powerstop rotor, easier said than done, there we go, put this nice new Powerstop rotor on our 2017 Ram 1500. There we go, and that look good. We'll get our rag back here and just get some finger marks off of here. And like I said earlier in the video, you can take a lug and we'll just thread it on there like that. And that will keep the rotor in place. Let's take our slide bracket here. We got brand new clips. Let's grab our pads. Brand new Powerstop Evolution pads. There we go. Don't jab yourself with a screwdriver. Not very smart. There we go, like that. We've got our clips off the bracket here, and we're just going to take our wire brush just a little bit, knock all the loose stuff off. And this truck's not that old, so it's not terribly rusty. There we go. That guy goes on there. That goes on here. Just like so. And now we are ready to put the slide bracket back on the truck. Thing to make mention of as you're putting these back together, and I wish I had paid attention to this when I did the driver's side. These clips are not all the same. They're two pairs, and you can see this is the driver's side caliper. And this is the passenger side caliper slide bracket. And the tabs are in different locations. And I had them flip-flopped. And that was, I don't know if it was a huge problem or not, but I wanted it done right, so I took it back. I took the driver's side back apart and I flipped the brackets to the correct side. So now this is what the driver's side rear is supposed to look like, and this is what the passenger side rear is supposed to look like. Now we've got our slide bracket back on here. We've just got to snug it up. We have a little bit of CRC ceramic or ceramic fortified brake system grease. We'll put a little bit on the slides. This will help the pad slide back and forth. On this truck, you want to put at least the back pad in before you put the slide bracket on, so I goofed on that just because there's no real way to get the back pad in. I got it off without taking the bracket, oh excuse me, I got the old pad off without taking the bracket off, probably because there was a lot less meat on it. But to kind of cock the pad to slide it in, there's a couple of tabs back here it hits. So what I ended up doing was just taking the slide bracket off, put this pad back on, put the slide back on, and then this guy goes in no problem. So if you're having trouble, that's what I ran into. So now we'll tighten these back up, we'll throw the caliper back on it, and we will tighten everything down, throw the tire back on, move on to the other side. Before we can put our caliper back on, we need to compress it. And what we're going to do, we're going to take a C-clamp and we are going to basically compress it. They make tools to do this. I don't own one, and you can pretty much get by with a C-clamp on most pistons or caliper pistons. The caliper is back on the slide. When you put this back on, remember to push the slide pins all the way up against the caliper itself, otherwise it won't go up against the slide bracket. It's a little tricky. Once you push these pins all the way out, the caliper should pretty much just drop into place, and then you can line these 10mm bolts up and tighten them down. Last step that we have to do before we can put the tire back on is we need to torque these bolts down. These bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket are roughly 22 foot-pounds. Now my foot-pound wrench or torque wrench doesn't go that low, and unfortunately my inch-pound torque wrench doesn't go that high. So 22 foot-pounds is roughly 264 inch-pounds. So we're gonna get it pretty close. I'm starting at about 160 inch-pounds because these bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket are not very big, and you don't want to break them. So we just did 160, unless of course you like drilling bolts out or chasing down caliper slide brackets. Okay. And when I torque a bolt, I always work up. I don't just set the torque wrench to where it needs to be. And some of that is, because I've had experiences before where I've had the torque wrench, these are cheap torque wrenches. Those of you guys who have some snap-ons or, the higher end stuff probably don't have this issue, but these cheap, crappy part store or home user store torque wrenches, I've had them where I've had them set at the correct torque, and they either don't latch where you don't get the snap, or they're too much torque and they snap the bolt. So I just don't trust them. It gets them pretty close, but that's how we do that. So we've got the caliper torqued to the caliper slide bracket. Now we need to torque the caliper slide bracket to the wheel hub, wheel knuckle assembly. Make sure when you're done using your torque wrench, you unset, especially if it's a manual one like this, I'm not sure about the digital ones that are out there, you don't want to leave tension on the spring that is inside of it. So this bar is pretty large, so we'll get it as close as we can. We'll start at about 90, just because it's got to be at 120. These bolts have to be at 120. There's 90 for the top. All right, let's go to 110. It's 110. Come up to the top. So pretty easy to change the brakes on the back of this truck. Not too bad. Last thing I do before putting the tires on, you guys have seen this in other videos, and I just showed it on the hub assembly, is I just put just a little bit in some spots to keep the wheel from seizing to the rotor. Make sure it's done around the hub. Now the other side, I haven't had that tire off in a while, so I can promise you that's going to be fun for me. With that said, this is what the complete side looks like. You might have to adjust your emergency brake. I checked it, it looks okay to me, but until I get the truck down on all fours and I test it, we'll see after that if I'm happy with how it holds. Guys, if you like these videos, please like and subscribe below. Turn on your bell notification or your post notification so you can see when I post the latest videos. You can follow along on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. at ACH Automotive. If you like these videos, leave me a comment, shoot me a message, thumbs up, thumbs down. So thanks for watching.